It's when we're trying to locate our body and wake ourselves up because we're in a realm that doesn't feel good. We have this existential or this metaphysical survival response. And that survival response gets translated into what we know as sleep paralysis. One of the scariest experiences we can undergo is sleep paralysis. So today, I'm going to be explaining what sleep paralysis is from an esoteric perspective. There are several different paradigms that we can look at sleep paralysis through. The most popular way to look at sleep paralysis as a disruptance between the brain signals that we have with waking sleep states and REM sleep states. So when there's an overlap between those two signals taking place, that's usually what sleep paralysis gets blamed on. It's that disruptance. And that's valid. That's actually one of the more exoteric reasons why we do experience sleep paralysis in the first place. And so in that perspective, we can look at this also having a very large component to it that has to do with our exposure to light. We were never designed to take in so much synthetic light. And for as long as we expose ourselves to that synthetic light, so even though daytime light is very positive for our well-being and for our physiology, we are exposed to too much synthetic light and we're overexposed to it in hours of the day and night that we're not supposed to have it being received. So this is causing a core disruption to our nervous system and its ability to be inside each part of the sleep cycle, especially REM sleep, because REM sleep has a very esoteric purpose to it. In REM sleep, we're able to process and filter out of our system trauma. That's why we see in this age really important healing modalities about moving the eyes and shifting them in a rapid eye movement, and how somehow that clears trauma. It's trying to mimic REM sleep, because REM sleep is you could look at it kind of like our way of shaking. Literally, REM sleep makes our eyes shake. But just how an animal can viscerally release trauma through shaking, we benefit from REM sleep by moving our eyes in a way that helps go deep into our cellular memory and then rise that trauma that's stored there into our subconscious, where we can emotionally process it in our sleep through the REM cycle. So when our REM cycle is deeply disturbed due to being overexposed with synthetic light sources that are disrupting our endocrine system and our neurobiology, so that acts as a block to not just our sleep, but also our nervous system's ability to process and move through our waking life, but also the deep emotional trauma that we have stored inside our cellular memory. So it acts as like this cascade effect where one issue now ripples out into these larger but deeper issues. Now let's get to the demonic stuff. Sleep paralysis, from an esoteric perspective, has a very strong link to the astral realm. Soul loss is when we have experienced shattering trauma to our vital life force that has fragmented the soul's essence into a state of disconnection. This disconnection's most recognizable symptom is disassociation. Its least recognizable symptom is anxiety. And even less than that, it's sleep paralysis. This fragmentation is a psychic ailment that opens up our energy field to all kinds of dark entities in the lower astral realm, because soul loss fractures the body, mind, spirit into severely contrasting points of attraction. The connecting factor between sleep paralysis and negative entities is this state of disassociation that is a symptom of soul loss. Disassociation is one of the main factors for why sleep paralysis is experienced when it's experienced due to soul loss. The role of healing is to bring ourselves into awareness of ourselves. Healing is not simply a sentiment. It is a process of the body, mind, spirit into wholeness. Without healing, there is no internal peace because there is no internal unity. If you'd like to learn more about soul loss, you can watch my video, What is Soul Loss? The astral realm is most manifested through the higher third density and all of the fourth density. In fact, if we wanted to be really reductive, we could just call the fourth density the astral realm. But it's more complex than that. I'm only trying to highlight how strongly there is a connection between the astral realm and the fourth density. So during sleep, we travel, whether we're aware of it or not, out of body. It is not uncommon for us to get stuck while we're out of body in the higher third density bandwidth to fourth density. So when we leave our body, we go through the higher third density realm before we enter the fourth density realm. Now, in that sweet spot of the higher third density realm, that's where earthbound spirits and astral attachments reside. So when we're stuck in between this third density and fourth density bandwidth during our sleep state, and we're out of body, but we're not conscious of it, or we're not astral projecting in a way where we know exactly where we're going or that we are astral projecting, we can get stuck inside this bandwidth. And when you're in a realm where there's earthbound spirits, ghosts, and astral attachments, that realm's not going to feel good. That's just a giant realm that you could look at unfinished business, addiction, trapped emotions. So that whole crust of the ether, that whole layer of the astral realm in this bandwidth specifically that I'm talking about is not going to feel good. It's going to be filled with, one way or another, what we could look at as negative entities. These negative entities don't even have to have a negative agenda specifically for us. We could literally just be sensing and feeling that state of the realm that we're in. We could be picking up the vibe there and then be scared because we're trying to get back in our body. So our consciousness is trying to locate back into our body. And during that sweet spot of that third density, fourth density realm, we cannot even be attacked. Those entities that reside there could actually perceive us as invading them. Either way, it doesn't feel good. And so we have this existential or this metaphysical survival response. And that survival response gets translated into what we know as sleep paralysis. It's when we're trying to locate our body and wake ourselves up because we're in a realm that doesn't feel good one way or another. And whether we feel like we're being invaded or we don't know this, but they feel, those entities there feel that they're being invaded, either way, we're trying to move our consciousness out of that astral realm at a rate that our body isn't fully out of a sleep state yet. So that locks up. And when we're locked up in between that state, because at that moment, we have going on neurotransmitters during sleep that immobilize us. So we're in a paralyzed state, but our consciousness is trying to move that cycle along quicker than it's actually going, so that we're out of that state where our neurotransmitters that only immobilize us during sleep are doing their thing. And so we're trying to wake ourselves up and our consciousness is awake, but we're still paralyzed. Now that is as benign as it gets when we're talking about the esoteric reasons for sleep paralysis, because the next reasons for sleep paralysis are more rare, but they're also less confusing, less, astral entities think that we're invading their realm. It's less of a confusion going on when we start getting into the more rare reasons for sleep paralysis, such as intentional negative entities. When we're in a psychic screen, a negative, hostile, malevolent entity is projecting through their mental body a whole, what we could look at, dream state. So it's like we're in a dream, but instead of it being a genuine dream, the way that we know dreams and the way that we're dreaming when we're in our subconscious realm, it looks and it feels like a dream, but it's not. So it's a mental screen, a psychic screen. So when we're in a psychic screen, we could experience sleep paralysis when our spiritual discernment, when our psychic spidey senses start ringing. So that's our higher self waking us up. It's almost like a defensive mechanism. So sleep paralysis in that way, even though it's not feeling positive, can be looked at as a psychic defense that is making us aware that we are in a psychic screen. So it helps wake us up, and that's why we experience being paralyzed. It's not necessarily at that point because a neurotransmitter glitch or a nervous system brain circuit glitch. Instead, the reason we are under a state of paralysis at that point is because our mental body is in a psychic screen that's being given hypnotic commands. So when it's being given hypnotic commands, one of them can be, you can't move. Okay, I know that sounds creepy, but if our mind is being given a psychic command that you can't move, then we'll experience sleep paralysis as though we can't move. That's why it's always good, whether this is just a case of we need blue blocker glasses and we need, nutrients, or whether this is something as rare as a more negative and a more ill will intended version of sleep paralysis. In my opinion, I would say psychic screens are only projected from entities who have a strong orientation toward being a predator, like a metaphysical muscle, very similar to how prey develop peripheral vision or how predators develop binocular vision. Psychic screens can come from a number of different types of entities. Some of these entities can be disincarnate spirits, while others can be incarnate service to self beings in another density. The most common disincarnate spirits that are attributed to sleep paralysis are incubus and succubus. These are types of parasitic energies because they feed off of incarnate beings' own loosh. Any kind of astral attachment in general feeds off of incarnate beings' life force, whether that astral attachment is an earthbound spirit or succubus. However, a disincarnate spirit can literally mean many things. An earthbound spirit feeds off of addiction, and incubus and succubus specifically run their life force through the egregore of base sexual energy. There is nothing wrong with sexual energy itself, as sexual energy is creative life force. However, this base sexual energy that succubus and incubus live from are when sexual energy is pure addiction to being cut off from higher energy centers. Yes, you can be addicted to being cut off from higher energy centers. It's intentional and parasitic in nature. None of this knowledge needs harsh judgments. It's just about being able to understand it. So even though incubus and succubus do cause sleep paralysis, the cause for one person's sleep paralysis from another person's will still truly depend on the person's own energetic template that makes up their own energy field. It's always good to just really try to wake up and try your most to activate your mental sovereignty during these encounters. Because, as I said, it could just be something like a metaphysical sleep apnea. In fact, I would even go as far as to say that before we get into the darker, more negative things regarding sleep paralysis, that we should rule out things like a Chiari malformation, or a severe tongue tie, or a very strong nutrient deficiency, especially ones regarding vitamin D and melatonin, especially those. But really, any type of severe nutrient deficiency can cause something that creates such a disruption within our own neurochemistry that then it has to escalate into something severe like the REM sleep overlapping with our waking states, which is when we experience sleep paralysis through normal means. But when we're experiencing things from the more rare end of the spectrum, where we're in a psychic screen that a negative, malevolent entity has us in the dream state, now we have to start really looking at our own fragmentation, aka our own soul loss, ancestral oaths or vows, some sort of ancestral contract that allowed contact, especially in metaphysical states of consciousness, astral, etheric layers of consciousness. So in this case, if it's coming from an ancestral oath or vow, then we could clear it through an ancestral contract. The reason why some ancestral lineages experience sleep paralysis is manifold. Some can experience it literally due to the proximity that their bloodline has to certain off-planet groups and entities. In this case, the entities themselves will feed off of that ancestral lineage's louche supply, which will be experienced by the person as sleep paralysis. And then some bloodlines can have a stronger resonance with the victim polarity of the victim-perpetrator spectrum. In fact, ET implants are most common in lineages that experience sleep paralysis, as well as a whole spectrum of supernatural phenomenon. We can clear these implants from our etheric body, and we can close out contracts and oaths and vows with any groups of entities, even if we don't know exactly what group it is. We don't have to know specifically what being or group was connected to our lineage. We can still clear that ancestral contract with them by infusing our sovereignty into that contract when we are writing it. The only thing that cannot be released through a contract is if you are experiencing sleep paralysis due to a fragmented aspect of yourself that appears to be acting against you or even harming you in a sleep paralysis experience. For integrating a fragmented aspect of yourself, you can watch my video, The Cosmic Role of the Inner Child. A contract or an oath that produced some sort of permission, some sort of vague but esoteric permission slip to be interacted with in sleep states, or be interacted with, even permeated or invaded in these realms during what's supposed to be dream state. So when we have those contracts coming from like the ancestral thread, then having some sort of ancestral contract to clear it would be most effective. And so what we're doing here when it comes to the ancestral contract is we're trying to release a vow or release some sort of oath that was made. So that should be the type of wording that is invoked. And that's the most important part of the contract. Not specific wording necessarily, but having and treating it like a contract in and of itself that you are releasing your lineage from, and then even signing it at the bottom, and then really taking time with it and absorbing it before you release it. And in the shamanic way, we release it through setting it on fire. You just set everything on fire. In fact, things are still frozen, like in time, unless they're set on fire. So make sure that you set that on fire. I hope this has helped you sleep better. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.